When nurse's aide Sierra James helps revive a reclusive billionaire after a devastating stroke, she never expects his estranged son to walk in, especially not with secrets, suspicion, and a spark that could change everything. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Pine Haven Care Home as Sierra James hurried down the corridor, her practical shoes squeaking against the polished floor. At 35, Sierra's dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her nurse's aide uniform had seen better days, but her warm brown eyes held a kindness that money couldn't buy. "Morning, Mr. Grayson," Sierra said as she entered room 212. "Beautiful day today." William Grayson, once a powerful shipping tycoon, now sat propped up against pillows, his thin frame barely making a dent in the hospital bed. At 82, his once commanding presence had faded, but his eyes still held a spark of the man he used to be. "Is it?" he asked, his voice raspy from disuse. "I'll take your word for it." Sierra smiled as she checked his vitals. "Trust me. The cherry trees are blooming. Would you like me to open the curtains wider?" William nodded and Sierra pulled the curtains back, flooding the room with light. This wasn't part of her job description, but Sierra never counted minutes when it came. Had her patience, especially not with William, who rarely had visitors despite being one of the richest men in the state. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, adjusting his blanket. "As well as can be expected," William replied, watching her work. "You look tired, Sierra." She shrugged. "Double shift. But I'm fine." The truth was, Sierra was exhausted. Her tiny apartment needed rent paid, and her ancient car was making worrying noises again. But complaining wasn't her style. Life had taught her early that nobody was coming to rescue her. Her mother had died when Sierra was only 12, leaving her in the care of a grandmother who believed that hard work was the answer to everything. "You're too kind to an old man," William said suddenly. Sierra paused. "You deserve kindness, Mr. Grayson. Everyone does." Later that day, Sierra was checking medication charts when Nurse Martinez rushed up to her. "It's Mr. Grayson," she said breathlessly. "He's having a stroke." Sierra dropped everything and ran. By the time she reached William's room, the doctor was already there, barking orders as William's body convulsed. His face was twisted in pain, his eyes wide with fear. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Tests were ordered, specialists consulted. Sierra stayed long past the end of her shift, watching the monitors and whispering reassurances to William, even though he couldn't respond. "You'll be okay," she said softly, holding his limp hand. "I'm right here." When the night shift arrived, the head nurse told Sierra to go home. "There's nothing more you can do," she said. "He's stable for now." But Sierra couldn't sleep that night. She kept seeing William's frightened eyes, kept hearing the beeping of the machines. The next morning she arrived an hour early, stopping by a small record store to buy a jazz album. She remembered William mentioning once, "I brought you something," she told him, even though he remained unconscious. She set up a small portable player and let the smooth saxophone fill the room. "You said Louis Armstrong always lifted your spirits." Days turned into weeks. William remained mostly unresponsive, occasionally opening his eyes but unable to speak. Sierra talked to him anyway, telling him about her day, reading him the newspaper, playing his favorite music. One Sunday she smuggled in a slice of apple pie from the diner across the street. "Don't tell anyone," she said with a conspiratorial smile, setting it on his bedside table. "But you mentioned once that your mother used to make the best apple pie. This probably doesn't compare, but the smell might bring back good memories." I didn't expect a response, so when William's eyes fluttered open and fixed on her, she gasped. "Mr. Grayson, can you hear me?" His lips moved slightly, though no sound came out. Sierra pressed the call button for the nurse, her heart racing with hope. Dr. Peterson examined William thoroughly, making notes on his clipboard. "There's definitely increased brain activity," he said. "But recovery from a stroke this severe is unpredictable. He may never fully regain his speech or mobility." "But there's a chance?" Sierra asked. Dr. Peterson's expression softened. "There's always a chance, especially with such dedicated care." That evening, Sierra sat by William's bed, reading aloud from a book of poetry she'd found in the care home's small library. She was so engrossed that she didn't notice the tall figure standing in the doorway until a deep voice interrupted. "What are you doing?" Sierra looked up, startled. A man in an expensive suit stood watching her, his face a harder, younger version of William's. He had the same strong jaw, the same piercing blue eyes, but none of the warmth. "I'm reading to your father," she said, recognizing him immediately from the photographs in William's room. "You must be Damien." Damien Grayson stepped into the room, his presence immediately filling the space. At 42, he had the confident bearing of a man used to being in charge. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his watch probably cost more than Sierra made in a year, and his expression was guarded. "And you are?" he asked coolly. "Sierra James. I'm a nurse's aide here at Pinehaven. Is reading poetry part of your job?" "Description, Miss James." There was an edge to his voice that made Sierra sit up straighter. "No, Mr. Grayson, but your father enjoys it." Damien glanced at the unconscious man. "How would you know what he enjoys? He can't exactly tell you." Sierra closed the book, keeping her voice even. "He had a good morning today. His brain scans show increased activity when there's music or when someone's talking to him." Damien seemed taken aback by her calm response. He'd clearly expected her to be intimidated. When she wasn't, he didn't quite know how to proceed. He walked to the window, looking out at the care home's modest garden. "How long has he been like this?" "Since the stroke? About 3 weeks now. And the prognosis?" Sierra hesitated. "Dr. Peterson can give you the medical details, but he's shown some positive signs. He opened his eyes earlier today." Damien turned, a flicker of something. Surprise? Hope? Crossing his face before it returned to its impassive mask. "I'll speak with the doctor," he said. "In the meantime, I'd appreciate it if you'd stick to your actual duties." Sierra stood, gathering her dignity around her like armor. "With all due respect, Mr. Grayson, your father responds positively to human connection. That is part of my duty, the most important part." For a moment they stared at each other, neither backing down. Then Sierra noticed something unexpected. Uncertainty in Damien's eyes. "He hasn't had many visitors," she added more gently. Damien's jaw tightened. "That's really none of your business." "You're right, I apologize." Sierra moved toward the door, then paused. "The jazz records on the shelf, they're his favorites. He mentioned once that you used to listen to them together when you were young." She left Damien standing there, staring at his father with an unreadable expression. The next day, Sierra was surprised to see Damien back at the care home. He was sitting stiffly beside William's bed, looking profoundly uncomfortable. He wasn't speaking, just watching the rise and fall of his father's chest. Sierra went about her duties, giving them privacy. But later, when she brought William's medication, she found Damien in the hallway on his phone, speaking sharply to someone about market shares and quarterly projections. "I don't care what Hamilton thinks," he was saying. "The acquisition goes forward as planned. I'll be back in the office tomorrow." He ended the call when he saw Sierra approaching. "Mr. Grayson," she acknowledged with a nod. "Ms. James." He pocketed his phone. "I've spoken with Dr. Peterson. He seems to think my father's condition is relatively stable." "That's good news." Damien ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him seem suddenly human. "I'm having him transferred to a private facility in the city." Sierra felt a jolt of alarm. "When?" "As soon as it can be arranged. Next week, possibly." "Is that what your father would want?" Damien's eyes narrowed. "I'm his next of kin. The decision is mine to make." Sierra knew she was overstepping, but she couldn't help herself. "Mr. Grayson, your father has established a routine here. He's showing signs of improvement. Moving him now could be disruptive. The care at Westside Memorial is superior. The care is different," Sierra corrected. "More clinical, perhaps. But your father responds to familiarity, to human connection. Are you questioning my judgment, Ms. James?" Sierra met his gaze steadily. "I'm advocating for my patient." Something shifted in Damien's expression, not softening exactly, but a flicker of respect. "I'll take your opinion under advisement," he said finally. Sierra doubted he meant it, but she nodded anyway. "Thank you." That night, Sierra checked on William before leaving. She was surprised to find Damien still there, sitting in silence. A record player had been set up, the one from William's room, and soft jazz filled the air. Damien looked up, clearly embarrassed to be caught in what might be construed as a sentimental moment. "You're working late," he observed. "So are you," Sierra replied. He gestured vaguely. "I had some calls to make, time difference with Europe." They both knew it was an excuse, but Sierra didn't call him on it. Instead, she checked William's IV and adjusted his blanket. "His color is better today," she said. Damien watched her work. "You do this every night? Check on him personally?" "When I can." "Why?" The question seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. Sierra considered her answer carefully. "Because everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, and because no one should be alone when they're vulnerable." Damien studied her, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "You don't know him. The kind of man he was." "I know the kind of man he is." "Now," Sierra said simply, "that's enough for me." As she turned to leave, Damien called after her. "Ms. James?" She paused. "Thank you," he said, the words clearly unfamiliar on his tongue. "For the record suggestion. It seems to help." Sierra smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "You're welcome, Mr. Grayson. Good night." After she left, Damien sat in the darkened room, listening to the music that had filled his childhood home before everything fell apart. Before his mother died, and his father retreated into work and silence. Before Damien learned to turn his own heart to stone, he looked at the old man in the bed, diminished now, but once so powerful. So distant. And for the first time in years, Damien allowed himself to feel something other than resentment. He didn't know it yet, but the wall he'd built around his heart had just developed its first tiny crack. And Sierra James, with her unflinching compassion and quiet strength, had put it there. A week passed, and to Sierra's surprise, William remained at Pinehaven. She had been certain that Damien would transfer his father to the expensive private hospital despite her objections. But each day she arrived at work to find William still there, with no mention of any transfer plans. What was even more surprising was Damien's continued presence. He began showing up every evening after business hours, his designer suits gradually giving way to slightly more casual attire. He never stayed long, an hour, sometimes two, and he rarely spoke to the staff. But he was there. One evening, Sierra brought a fresh pitcher of water to William's room and found Damien sitting beside the bed staring at his phone. "I brought fresh water," she said, placing the pitcher on the bedside table. Damien looked up, nodding slightly. "Thank you." Sierra checked William's vitals, aware of Damien's eyes following her movements. There was something different about him. Today, a tension in his shoulders, a tightness around his eyes. "Everything okay?" she asked before she could stop herself. Damien seemed startled by the question. "Excuse me? You seem concerned about something." He pocketed his phone with a frown. "It's nothing, just work." Sierra nodded, accepting his dismissal. She was turning to leave when Damien spoke again. "Actually, it's my father's company." He sounded reluctant to share, yet somehow compelled to. "There are some irregularities I discovered in the financial reports." Sierra paused. "Irregularities. Since his stroke, my father's board of directors has been making decisions that don't align with his usual business strategies." Damien's jaw tightened, including selling off significant assets at suspiciously low prices. "That sounds serious," Sierra said. "It is." Damien ran a hand through his hair, momentarily disrupting its perfect styling. "The problem is proving it. As long as my father is incapacitated." He trailed off, glancing at William. Sierra followed his gaze. "He's been more responsive the past few days. Dr. Peterson is encouraged." "Responsive how?" "He squeezed my hand yesterday," Sierra said. "And he's been opening his eyes more frequently, focusing on people when they speak." Damien straightened. "Why wasn't I informed?" "I'm sure Dr. Peterson was planning to update you," Sierra said carefully. "These are small changes, Mr. Grayson. Not dramatic improvements, but they're improvements all the same," Sierra nodded. "Yes, they are." Damien stood and walked to the window, his back to her. "My father and we haven't spoken in almost 5 years." "Not really spoken." Sierra remained silent. sensing he needed to talk. After my mother died, he shut down. Damien's voice was low. Threw himself into work, became even more demanding, more critical. I was 23, had just finished business school. He made it clear that grief was a luxury he couldn't afford, and neither could I. Sierra watched his reflection in the window, the way his shoulders carried an invisible weight. "That must have been very difficult," she said softly. Damien turned, his expression guarded again, as if he'd revealed too much. "It's in the past." But they both knew it wasn't. The past was right there in the room with them, breathing shallowly in a hospital bed. "I should get back to my rounds," Sierra said, giving him space. As she reached the door, Damien called after her. "Miss James," she turned. "Yes? What do you talk to him about? When you sit with him?" Sierra smiled slightly. "Everything, nothing. The weather, books I'm reading. Sometimes I tell him about the other residents." She paused. "He liked hearing about my grandmother, how she taught me to make her special chicken soup when I was a girl." Damien seemed to consider this. "And that helps? Just talking?" "I believe it does," Sierra said. "The human voice is powerful. Connection is powerful." After she left, Damien sat beside his father again. After a long moment of silence, he began to speak haltingly about his day, feeling foolish but determined to try. In the days that followed, William showed continued signs of improvement. Small things, a finger twitch, eye movement, a mumbled word. Dr. Peterson was cautiously optimistic. "The brain is remarkable," he told Damien during a meeting that Sierra was asked to attend. "It can forge new pathways, adapt after injury, but recovery is usually slow and rarely complete." "What's the best-case scenario?" Damien asked. Dr. Peterson glanced at Sierra before answering. "With continued therapy, Mr. Grayson might regain limited speech, some mobility. His cognitive abilities may improve. And the worst case? He remains as he is now," the doctor said gently. "Or declines." Damien nodded stiffly. "Thank you for your candor." After the meeting, Sierra found Damien in the small garden behind the care home, staring at nothing. "Dr. Peterson is one of the best," she said, joining him. "If anyone can help, your father recover, he can." Damien didn't look at her. "I need my father to get better, Miss James." There was something in his voice that made Sierra study him more closely. "Because of the company issues?" "Yes," he admitted. "But not only that." He finally turned to her. "Is that terrible? That I have practical reasons for wanting him to recover, not just emotional ones?" Sierra considered her answer. "I think it's human. My father would call it weak, sentimental. From what I've seen, your father appreciates the sentimental more than you might think," Sierra said. "He responds to the music, to stories about family." Damien's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "He used to play those records on Sunday mornings. My mother would make pancakes and he'd dance with her in the kitchen." A shadow crossed his face. "After she died, he put the records away. Never played them again." Sierra touched his arm lightly. Maybe that was his way of coping with the pain. "We all handle grief differently." Damien looked down at her hand on his arm and Sierra pulled it back, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to." "It's fine," he said quickly. "I should get back to the office." He walked away, leaving Sierra wondering if she'd overstepped. But the next day, Damien brought in a photo album that he said he'd found in his father's study. He showed it to Sierra during her lunch break, pictures of William and his late wife, of family vacations, of a young Damien graduating from college with both parents proudly at his side. "I forgot he kept these," Damien said, his voice unusually soft. Sierra smiled at a photo of a teenage Damien on a sailboat with his father. "You look like him." "So I've been told," Damien replied, but there was no bitterness in his voice. That evening, Sierra was working a double shift when she passed William's room and overheard Damien's voice. "Remember that summer in Maine?" he was saying. "When the engine died on the boat and we drifted for hours? Mother was furious with you for not checking the fuel gauge." Sierra smiled to herself and continued walking, not wanting to intrude. Later, when she brought William's evening medication, she found Damien still there. "You're here late," she observed. "Lost." "Track of time," Damien said, standing. "I was just about to leave." Sierra moved to check William's IV, but as she leaned over the bed, William's eyes suddenly opened. His lips moved, trying to form words. Damien." The name was slurred but unmistakable. Sierra gasped, and Damien rushed to his father's side. "Dad, can you hear me?" William's eyes focused on his son. "Here," he managed to say. Sierra quickly paged Dr. Peterson, her heart racing with excitement. "Keep talking to him," she urged Damien. "This is a breakthrough." Damien took his father's hand, his usual composure cracking. "I'm here, Dad, I'm right here." For the next hour, the room was a flurry of activity as doctors examined William. He drifted in and out of awareness, but he had definitively spoken, recognized his son. It was more progress than anyone had dared hope for. When things finally calmed down, Sierra found Damien in the hallway, his back against the wall, looking shell-shocked. "He knew me," he said when he saw her. "He actually knew me." Sierra's face broke into a wide smile. "It's wonderful." Dr. Peterson said it was because of the consistent stimulation, the talking, the music. Damien looked at her with new eyes. "Because of you," Sierra shook her head. "Not just me, you've been here every day too. But you started it. You believed in him when I—" He couldn't finish the sentence. In that moment, something shifted between them. Damien saw Sierra. Really. Saw her for the first time. Not just a nurse's aide doing her job, but a woman with an extraordinary capacity for compassion, for seeing value in people others had given up on. "Thank you," he said, and this time the words came easily. Sierra felt a warmth spread through her chest, but she quickly tamped it down. Men like Damien Grayson didn't fall for women like her, and she'd been burned before by opening her heart too easily. "I should finish my rounds," she said. Damien nodded, but as she walked away, he called after her. "Sierra?" She turned, noticing. He'd used her first name. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow to celebrate my father's progress?" Sierra hesitated. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" "Because I'm your father's caregiver. It wouldn't be professional." "It's just dinner," Damien said, stepping closer. "A thank you." Sierra looked up at him, at the face that had somehow become familiar over these past weeks, the face that was no longer quite so cold, no longer quite so guarded. "I bring my own lunch," she said finally. "You could join me in the staff lounge if you'd like. Nothing fancy, but the coffee is decent." A smile, a real one, transformed Damien's face. "I'll be there." The next day, Sierra was nervous as she prepared her simple lunch of a turkey sandwich and apple. She'd put on a touch of lip gloss, then scolded herself for being silly. This wasn't a date. It was just lunch with a patient's family member. But when Damien walked into the staff lounge wearing casual slacks and a blue sweater that matched his eyes, her heart betrayed her with a flutter. "I brought reinforcements," he said, placing a bag from an upscale deli on the table. "I hope you don't mind." Inside were gourmet sandwiches, a container of soup, and 2 slices of chocolate cake. "You didn't have to do that," Sierra said, slightly embarrassed. "I wanted to," Damien replied, simply. As they ate, conversation flowed more easily than Sierra had expected. Damien asked about her life, and Sierra found herself sharing stories about growing up with her strict grandmother, about her dream of someday becoming a registered nurse if she could ever afford the schooling. "You'd make an excellent nurse," Damien said. "You have a natural gift for it." Sierra felt herself blush. "Thank you." "No, I mean it." Damien leaned forward. "You see people, Sierra. Not just their conditions or their bank accounts, you see them." The intensity in his eyes made her look away. "It's not that special, really." "It is in my world," Damien said quietly. "Trust me." Sierra changed the subject, asking about his work. Damien told her about the shipping company his father had built, about the challenges of global commerce, about his own rise through the ranks to become CEO of his own investment firm. "So you didn't want to run your father's company?" Sierra asked. A shadow crossed Damien's face. "He didn't want me to. Said I was too impulsive, too willing to take risks. He shrugged. Maybe he was right. I built my own company with a different model. We've done well. He must be proud of you. I don't know, Damien said honestly. We never discussed it. Sierra reached across the table and touched his hand lightly. Maybe now you'll have the chance. Damien looked down at her hand on his, then slowly turned his palm upward, his fingers curling around hers. Maybe we will. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then the door to the lounge opened as another staff member walked in, and they quickly pulled their hands apart. I should get back to work, Sierra said, standing. Damien nodded, gathering the remains of their lunch. Of course. At the door, he paused. Sierra? She turned. Would you have dinner with me? A real dinner, at a restaurant, not as a thank you, but as... He seemed to search for the right words. As two people who might like to know each other better, Sierra knew she should say no. She had a strict policy about not dating patients' relatives. And beyond that, she and Damien came from entirely different worlds. What could possibly come of it except heartache? But looking at him now, seeing the vulnerability beneath the confident exterior, she found herself nodding. Yes, she said softly. I'd like that. The smile that lit up Damien's face was worth any risk her heart might be taking. What neither of them noticed was William, who was being wheeled back from physical therapy by an orderly. His eyes, more alert than they had been in weeks, watched the exchange between his son and Sierra. And deep in those aged eyes was a glimmer of something that looked very much like hope. Sierra stood in front of her closet, pushing hangers back, hand forth with growing frustration. Nothing seemed right for a date with someone like Damien Grayson. Most of her clothes were practical: jeans, simple tops, comfortable shoes. Perfect for her busy life of work and little else, but not for dining at the kind of restaurant where Damien probably had a permanent reservation. Finally, she pulled out a simple blue dress she'd bought on sale last year for a co-worker's wedding. It wasn't fancy, but it was the best she had. She paired it with her only decent pair of heels and a silver necklace that had belonged to her mother. As she applied a light touch of makeup, Sierra wondered what she was doing. She and Damien were from completely different worlds. He was wealthy, powerful, used to the finer things. She was a nurse's aide living paycheck to paycheck in a tiny apartment. This is crazy, she told her reflection. But she didn't cancel. Damien arrived exactly on time, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than 3 months of Sierra's rent. When Sierra opened her apartment door, she saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes, followed by something warmer. You look beautiful, he said simply. Sierra felt her cheeks warm. Thank you. He'd brought her flowers, not an elaborate arrangement, but a simple bouquet of daisies and sunflowers that somehow seemed perfect. I remembered you mentioned these were your favorites, he said, suddenly seeming almost shy. Sierra was touched that he'd remembered such a small detail from their conversations at the care home. They are. Thank you. She put them in water before they left, Damien waiting patiently in her small living room, looking both out of place and strangely right. To Sierra's surprise, Damien didn't take her to an upscale restaurant in the city as she'd expected. Instead, they drove to a small Italian place overlooking the harbor, tucked away from the main tourist areas. I hope this is okay, he said, as they were seated at a table by the window. It's not very fancy, but the food is excellent. My mother used to love this place. It's perfect, Sierra said, genuinely pleased. The restaurant was cozy and warm, with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. It felt personal in a way a 5-star restaurant wouldn't have. Over plates of homemade pasta and glasses of wine, they talked more easily than Sierra had expected. Damien asked questions about her life and actually listened to the answers. He wanted to know about her dreams, her struggles, the grandmother who had raised her with stern love. She sounds like a formidable woman, Damien said with a smile. She was, Sierra agreed. Worked as a housekeeper her whole life, raised me on her own after my mom died. Never complained, never asked for help. She twirled pasta around her fork. She's the one who taught me that hard work and kindness were the 2 most important things in life. She did a good job, Damien said softly. Sierra looked up, caught by the sincerity in his voice. What about your mother? What was she like? A shadow of old grief crossed Damien's face, but he didn't deflect the question. She was warmth personified, always laughing, always making our house feel like a home. He smiled at a memory. She was the opposite of my father in many ways, spontaneous, emotional, terrible with business, but brilliant with people. They balanced each other, Sierra suggested. They did. Damien's eyes grew distant. When she died, cancer, it was quick but brutal. It was like all the light went out of our home. My father, he paused. He couldn't cope with the grief, so he just shut down that part of himself, and he expected me to do the same. But you couldn't, Sierra said gently. No. Damien met her eyes. But I tried. For years, I tried to be what he wanted. Cold, calculating, focused only on success. And I got very good at it. Too good. Damien's laugh was without humor. Yes, too good. I have the corner office and the investment portfolio to prove it, and not much else. The admission hung between them, surprisingly vulnerable from a man Sierra had first seen as the epitome of cold ambition. It's never too late to change, she said after a moment. Damien's expression softened as he looked at her. I'm beginning to believe that. They shared dessert, a rich tiramisu that Sierra declared was the best she'd ever tasted, and talked about lighter topics, favorite books, travel destinations, the small joys of everyday life that Sierra treasured, and Damien was just beginning to notice again. On the drive back to her apartment, a comfortable silence fell between them. Sierra looked out at the city lights, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. At her door, Damien hesitated. I had a wonderful time, he said. So did I, Sierra replied honestly. He stepped closer, and Sierra's heart quickened. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he took her hand and squeezed it gently. Good night, Sierra. Good night, Damien. She watched him walk to his car, torn between disappointment and relief. She was falling for him. She could admit that now, but she was also afraid. Men like Damien didn't usually end up with women like her, not in real life. The next day at work, Sierra tried to maintain her professional demeanor, but she couldn't. Help the flutter in her stomach when Damien arrived for his daily visit with William. He caught her eye across the nurse's station and smiled, a small private smile that made her cheeks warm. They didn't get a chance to talk alone, but that smile told Sierra everything she needed to know. Last night had meant something to him. 2. William's recovery continued to progress slowly but steadily. He was now able to speak in short sentences, though his words were sometimes slurred. His right side remained mostly paralyzed, but he had regained some movement in his left arm and hand. Dr. Peterson was pleased. This is remarkable progress for someone his age, he told Damien during a follow-up meeting that Sierra attended. His determination is impressive. He was always stubborn, Damien said, but there was fondness in his voice now where there once would have been criticism. After the meeting, Damien and Sierra walked together to William's room. My father asked about you this morning. Damien said. Sierra looked surprised. About me? He wanted to know if I'd been smart enough to ask you to dinner yet. Damien's lips quirked in a half smile. Apparently, he's been more aware than we realized. Sierra laughed, then grew serious. Does that bother you? That he knows about whatever this is between us? Damien stopped walking and turned to face. No, he said simply. Does it bother you? Sierra shook her head. No. Good. He glanced around to make sure they were alone, then leaned down and kissed her quickly but tenderly. I've been wanting to do that since last night, he murmured. Sierra felt as though her heart might burst from happiness, but before she could respond, a nurse rounded the corner and they stepped apart. Ms. James, there you are, the nurse said. Mr. Grayson, William, that is, has been asking for you. Sierra nodded, trying to compose herself. I'll be right there. When they entered William's room, the elderly man was sitting up in bed, looking more alert than Sierra had seen him since before his stroke. His eyes moved between Sierra and his son, a knowing gleam in them. About time, he said, his voice raspy but clear. Damien raised an eyebrow. About time for what, Dad? You, to bring a good woman home." William's words were slow but deliberate. Sierra blushed deeply, but Damien just laughed, a genuine, easy laugh that Sierra had never heard from him before. "You're getting ahead of yourself, old man," he said, but his eyes were warm as they met Sierra's. The next few weeks brought significant changes. William continued to improve, even beginning short sessions of physical therapy in a wheelchair. Damien split his time between the office and the care home, somehow managing both his company and his renewed relationship with his father, and Sierra found herself falling deeper in love with Damien with each passing day. They had dinner together whenever her schedule allowed, sometimes at restaurants, other times simple meals she cooked in her apartment. They took walks along the harbor, talked for hours, and slowly, carefully, began to build something neither had expected. But not everything was moving smoothly. One afternoon, Sierra overheard Damien on the phone in William's room, his voice tense. "The board cannot vote on this without my input," he was saying. "Those mining interests have been in my father's company for 30 years. Selling them now, at that price, would be nothing short of theft." When he ended the call, he looked frustrated and worried. "What's happening?" Sierra asked. Damien ran a hand through his hair. "The board is moving forward with some highly questionable decisions. I've tried to intervene as my father's proxy, but they're challenging my authority." "Can they do that?" "They're claiming that since I run a competing company, I have a conflict of interest." Damien's jaw tightened, which is technically true but irrelevant in this case. "What will you do?" "Fight them, of course." Damien's eyes hardened in a way that reminded Sierra of when she'd first met him. "But it would be much simpler if my father could speak for himself." She touched his arm gently. "He's getting stronger every day." "I know." Damien's expression softened as he looked at her. "And that's largely thanks to you." Their moment was interrupted when a nurse entered with William's medication. Sierra stepped back, returning to her professional role effortlessly. Later that day, Sierra was surprised to see a familiar face at the care home, Richard Hamilton, the chairman of William's board of directors. She recognized him from news photos Damien had shown her. He was talking with Dr. Peterson outside William's room, his expression grave. When he left, Sierra approached Dr. Peterson. "What did Mr. Hamilton want?" The doctor looked uncomfortable. "He was asking about Mr. Grayson's condition, his prognosis." "And what did you tell him?" "The truth, that William is improving but remains significantly impaired." Dr. Peterson frowned. He seemed disappointed by the news, which struck me as odd. Sierra felt a chill. Hamilton would benefit if William remained incapacitated and unable to challenge the board's decisions. When she told Damien about the visit, his face darkened with anger. "They're getting nervous," he said. "Dad's improvement threatens their plans." "What exactly are they trying to do?" Damien hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "I believe they're systematically undervaluing and selling off my father's assets to companies they have personal interests in. It's complex and difficult to prove, but the pattern is there. That's illegal, isn't it?" "Very, but without my father's testimony." Damien shook his head. "It would be my word against theirs, and I'm in a weak position legally." Sierra thought for a moment. "What if we could document your father's wishes? If he's lucid enough to communicate his opposition to these sales?" Hope flickered in Damien's eyes. "That might work, but he'd need to be assessed by an independent physician to confirm his mental competence." "I'll speak with Dr. Peterson," Sierra said. "He's ethical. He'll help if he can." That evening, Sierra sat with William while Damien made some calls. She explained the situation in simple terms, and William's eyes filled with understanding and anger. "Thieves," he managed to say. "My company, my life's work." "We're going to help you stop them," Sierra promised, taking his hand. "But you need to keep getting stronger." William squeezed her hand with surprising strength. "For Damien," he said. "And you?" Sierra smiled. "Yes, for both of us." The next day, Dr. Peterson arranged for a respected neurologist to examine William. The assessment was cautiously positive. William was deemed to have periods of clear mental capacity, though his communication limitations made legal matters complicated. Damien immediately contacted his lawyers, who began preparing documents for William to sign, expressing his explicit opposition to the recent board decisions and temporarily granting Damien full power of attorney. "This will buy us time," Damien explained to Sierra. "Time for Dad to get stronger, for us to gather evidence." Sierra was proud of him. The cold businessman she'd first met was now fighting not just for his own interests, but for his father's legacy and the employees whose livelihoods depended on the company. One evening, after a particularly encouraging therapy session for William, Damien took Sierra to dinner at an upscale restaurant overlooking the city. He seemed nervous, distracted, checking his phone repeatedly. "Is everything okay?" Sierra asked. "Is it the company?" Damien put his phone away with the apologetic smile. "No, everything's fine. I'm sorry. I'm being terrible company." "Not terrible," Sierra teased. "Just moderately bad." He laughed, relaxing somewhat. "There's actually something I wanted to ask you." Sierra's heart skipped a beat. "Yes?" "The company is hosting a charity gala next weekend. It's a big event. Clients, business, partners, press." He took a deep breath. "I'd like you to come with me as my date." Sierra hadn't expected that. "Your date? In front of all those people?" "Is that a problem?" Damien asked, suddenly uncertain. "No, it's just—" Sierra hesitated. "Won't they expect you to bring someone more like them?" Damien reached across the table and took her hand. "I don't care what they expect. I want you there, Sierra. You're the most important person in my life right now." The declaration took her breath away. "Damien, you don't have to answer right away," he said quickly. "I know it's a lot. You'd be stepping into my world and it can be harsh sometimes." Sierra thought about it. She would feel out of place, underdressed, judged, but she would be with Damien. And maybe it was time to stop letting fear make her decisions. "Yes," she said finally. "I'll go with you." The smile that lit up Damien's face was worth any discomfort she might face. He leaned across the table and kissed her, not caring who saw. "Thank you," he said softly. "It means more than you know." The day of the gala arrived, and Sierra was a bundle of nerves. She'd bought a new dress, stretching her budget to the limit for a simple but elegant black gown that made her feel almost worthy of standing beside someone like Damien. She was putting the finishing touches on her makeup when her phone rang. It was Nurse Martinez from the care home. "Sierra, you need to come in," she said, her voice urgent. "It's Mr. Grayson." Sierra's heart dropped. "William, what's happened?" "He's had another stroke. A bad one. I'll be right there." Sierra hung up, her hands shaking. She called Damien immediately, catching him as he was leaving for her apartment. "I'll meet you at the care home," he said, his voice tight with worry. By the time Sierra arrived, still in her gown, William was stabilized but unconscious. Dr. Peterson met them outside his room, his expression grave. "This stroke was more severe than the first," he explained. "We've done everything we can to minimize the damage, but—" He shook his head. "The next 24 hours will be critical." Sierra looked through the window at William, suddenly frail again under the harsh hospital lights. Damien stood beside her, his face a mask of controlled anguish. "He was doing so well," he said quietly. Sierra slipped her hand into his. "He's strong. He'll fight." They sat with William through the night, the gala forgotten. Damien never left, his father's side speaking to him softly, urging him to hold on. In the early hours of the morning, as Sierra dozed in a chair by the window, she was awakened by Damien's voice. "Sierra," he called softly. "He's awake." She hurried to the bed. William's eyes were open, focusing with difficulty on his son. His lips moved, trying to form words. "Don't try to talk," Damien said gently. "Just rest." But William was determined. His left hand reached out weakly and Damien took it. "Love," William managed to say, the word barely audible. "Her." Damien's eyes filled with tears as he looked from his father to Sierra. "I do, Dad. I do." It was the first time he'd said it, even indirectly, and Sierra felt her own eyes welling up. William seemed satisfied, his eyes drifting closed again. Dr. Peterson, summoned by the night nurse, examined William, and reported that his vital signs were stabilizing. "It's a good sign that he regained consciousness," he said, "but he's still in critical condition." Dawn was breaking as Sierra and Damien stepped outside for some fresh air. They stood in the small garden behind the care home watching the sun rise. "Did you mean it?" Sierra asked softly. "What you said to your father?" Damien turned to face her, his eyes red-rimmed from the long night but earnest. "Yes," he said simply. "I love you, Sierra. I think I have since that first day when you were reading poetry to my father." Sierra's heart felt too full for words. She reached up and touched his face gently. "I love you too." He pulled her close, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And in that moment, as the sun rose on a new day and William fought for his life inside, Sierra allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, fairy tales sometimes did come true. What neither of them saw was the black car parked across the street, or the man inside taking photographs of their embrace. Richard Hamilton lowered his camera with a satisfied smile. This would be exactly what he needed. The days following William's second stroke were tense but hopeful. His condition stabilized, though he remained mostly unresponsive, occasionally opening his eyes or squeezing a hand when asked. Sierra took extra shifts to be near him, while Damien worked remotely from the care home as much as possible, determined not to leave his father's side. "You should go home and rest," Sierra told Damien one evening, finding him asleep in the chair beside William's bed, his laptop still open on his knees. Damien straightened, rubbing his eyes. "I'm fine." "You're exhausted," Sierra countered gently. "Your father would want you to take care of yourself. I can't leave him." Damien looked at the frail figure in the bed. "Not when he's fighting so hard." Sierra sat on the arm of his chair, slipping her hand into his. "Then at least let me bring you a decent meal. The cafeteria food here is terrible." He smiled up at her, squeezing her hand. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," she teased, kissing his forehead. "But you're stuck with me anyway." That simple moment of tenderness was captured in a photograph that appeared the next morning in the business section of the city newspaper, alongside the headline, "Grayson Heir Romance's Father's Caretaker Amid Company Crisis." Sierra saw it first, the paper left conspicuously on the nurse's station counter. Her stomach dropped as she read the accompanying article, which insinuated that Damien was using his relationship with a care worker to gain control of his father's company assets, while the elderly man was incapacitated. The article quoted Richard Hamilton extensively, expressing grave concerns about Damien's motivations and suggesting that Sierra might be helping him manipulate William's care for financial gain. "This is outrageous," Nurse Martinez said, reading over Sierra's shoulder. "Everyone here knows how dedicated you've been to Mr. Grayson's recovery." Sierra could barely speak past the knot in her throat. "I need to find Damien." She found him in the parking lot, having just arrived. One look at his face told her he'd seen the article. "Damien, don't," he said sharply, then immediately softened. "I'm sorry. I'm not angry at you. I'm furious with Hamilton and his puppets at the newspaper." "People will believe it," Sierra said, her voice small. "That I'm helping you somehow. That I only cared for your father to—" "Stop!" Damien took her hands firmly. "Anyone who knows you would never believe that, and I don't care what anyone else thinks." But Sierra could see the strain in his eyes. This wasn't just about their reputations. The article threatened to undermine Damien's legal standing in the fight for his father's company. "What will you do?" she asked. "Fight back," Damien said grimly. "I've already called my lawyers, and I'm going to the board meeting today in person." "Is that wise?" "Probably not, but I'm done playing defense." He hesitated, then asked carefully, "Are you okay? I know this kind of exposure wasn't what you signed up for." Sierra squared her shoulders. "I'm tougher than I look, Damien Grayson. It'll take more than a sleazy newspaper article to scare me off." Relief flooded his face. He pulled her into a tight embrace, not caring who might see. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I love you too," she replied. "Now go show those board members who they're dealing with." As Damien headed to the confrontation at his father's company, Sierra returned to her duties. She held her head high, despite the curious glances and whispered conversations that followed her through the halls. When she entered William's room for her regular check, she was surprised to find him awake, his eyes clearer than they had been since the second stroke. "Sierra," he said, his voice weak but determined. "Mr. Grayson." She moved to his side, checking his vitals. "How are you feeling?" "Article," he managed to say. "Saw it." Sierra's heart sank. "I'm so sorry. It's all lies." William shook his head slightly. "Know that." He reached for her hand with trembling fingers. "Help Damien." "I am," she assured him. "We all are." "No." William's grip tightened with surprising strength. "Safe. In my desk." Sierra frowned, not understanding. "What's in your desk?" "Files, proof." Each word seemed to cost him tremendous effort. "Against Hamilton?" Sierra's eyes widened. "You have evidence against Hamilton?" "Something that could help Damien." William nodded weakly. "Key, jacket pocket, blue suit." Sierra's mind raced. William must have suspected Hamilton's schemes before his stroke. If he had documentation, "I'll find it," she promised. "And I'll get it to Damien." William relaxed slightly, the effort of communication clearly exhausting him. After ensuring William was comfortable, Sierra called Damien, but the call went straight to voicemail. The board meeting must have already started. Making a quick decision, Sierra spoke with Dr. Peterson, explaining the situation. He agreed to stay with William while Sierra took her lunch break early. "Be careful," the doctor warned. "If what Mr. Grayson says is true, these people have already shown they'll go to great lengths to protect themselves." Sierra drove to the Grayson mansion, a stately home she had seen only in photographs. The housekeeper, who knew Sierra from Damien's descriptions, let her in reluctantly. "Mr. Damien didn't mention you'd be coming," she said. "It's an emergency," Sierra explained. "William, Mr. Grayson Sr., sent me to find something in his study." The housekeeper led her to William's study, a handsome room lined with books, and dominated by a massive desk. Sierra found the blue suit jacket hanging in a closet nearby. In the inner pocket was a small key. The bottom drawer of William's desk was locked. The key fit perfectly. Inside, Sierra found a folder labeled simply Hamilton. It contained detailed records of transactions, copies of emails, and handwritten notes in William's precise script, all documenting what appeared to be a systematic pattern of fraud by Hamilton and 3 other board members. Sierra's hands trembled as she realized the significance of what she was holding. This was exactly what Damien needed to stop Hamilton. She tried calling Damien again, but still no answer. Looking at her watch, she realized she needed to return to work soon. She couldn't wait. The Grayson shipping headquarters was a gleaming skyscraper downtown. Sierra felt completely out of place as she walked through the lobby in her nurse's scrubs. The folder clutched tightly to her chest. "I need to see Damien Grayson," she told the receptionist. "It's urgent." The young woman looked Sierra up and down skeptically. "Mr. Grayson is in a board meeting. He can't be disturbed." "Please, it's about his father. I'm Sierra James." Recognition flickered in the receptionist's eyes. Clearly she had seen the newspaper article. "Take a seat, Ms. James. I'll see what I can do." Sierra waited anxiously, checking the time repeatedly. She needed to get back to the care home for her afternoon shift. After what felt like hours but was really only 15 minutes, a security guard approached. "Ms. James, Mr. Hamilton asked me to escort you up." Something in his tone made Sierra uneasy, but she followed. The folder felt heavy in her hands. The boardroom was on the top floor. Through the glass walls, Sierra could see a tense meeting in progress. Damien sat at one end of a long table, facing Hamilton and several other stern-faced executives. When the security guard opened the door, all heads turned toward her. Damien's face registered shock, then alarm. "Sierra, what are you doing here?" "Before," she could answer. Hamilton rose, smiling thinly. "Ms. James, how kind of you to join us. We were just discussing you, in fact." "I need to speak with Damien," Sierra said firmly. "It's about his father." "Is William all right?" Damien asked, already on his feet. "He's stable," Sierra assured him. "But he sent me to find something important." Hamilton's smile faltered slightly. "Whatever personal matters you have with Mr. Grayson can surely wait until after our meeting." Sierra met his gaze directly. "Actually, Mr. Hamilton, this concerns you too." She walked to Damien, handing him the folder. "Your father kept records. He knew what was happening." Damien opened the folder, his expression changing from confusion to fierce satisfaction as he scanned the contents. Hamilton stepped forward. "What is that? What are you showing him?" "Evidence," Damien said, his voice deadly quiet. "My father documented everything, Richard. Every fraudulent deal, every conflict of interest, every penny you and your friends have stolen from this company." The color drained from Hamilton's face. "That's absurd. You can't possibly—" "It's all here," Damien cut him off, holding up a particularly damning email. "Including your instructions to sell the Australian mining interests to your brother-in-law's company at 40% below market value." The other board members began murmuring among themselves, some looking genuinely shocked, others shifting uncomfortably. "This meeting is adjourned," Damien announced. "My lawyers will be in touch with each of you. Those not involved in Hamilton's scheme have nothing to fear." He turned to Hamilton, who stood rigid with fury. "As for you, I suggest you get your own lawyer. A good one." Hamilton's eyes narrowed as they fell on Sierra. "You'll regret this, both of you. Your gold-digging girlfriend has no idea what she's gotten herself into." Sierra flinched at the ugly accusation, but Damien stepped between them. "That's enough, Richard. Security will escort you out." As Hamilton was led away, still hurling threats, Damien turned to Sierra. "How did you know about this?" he asked in amazement. "Your father told me. He woke up more lucid than he's been in days." Sierra smiled. "He's still fighting for you, Damien." Damien pulled her into a tight embrace, not caring about the curious stares of the remaining board members. "You're incredible," he whispered. "Both of you." Back at the care home, they found William sleeping peacefully. Dr. Peterson reported that his vital signs had actually improved since the morning. "It's as if getting that message to you lifted a weight from him," the doctor said. Damien sat beside, his father's bed, taking his hand gently. "Thank you, Dad," he said softly. "You saved your company." Again. That evening, as Sierra was preparing to leave after her shift, she found Damien waiting for her in the lobby. "I thought you'd be busy with lawyers all night," she said. I will be for days." He took her hands. "But I needed to see you first. Is everything okay?" "Better than okay." His eyes shone with a new light. "The preliminary board vote has been invalidated. Hamilton and his cronies are being removed. And most importantly, my father's condition has been upgraded. Dr. Peterson thinks he might make a more substantial recovery than we hoped." Sierra's face lit up. "Damien, that's wonderful." "None of it would have happened without you," he said, seriously. "You've changed everything, Sierra. My relationship with my father, my perspective on what matters in life." He paused. "My heart." Sierra felt tears stinging her eyes. "I was just doing my job." "No." Damien shook his head. "I were doing what you always do, seeing people as they really are, not as their bank accounts or job titles or mistakes define them." His voice grew softer. "You saw me, Sierra. Not the cold businessman everyone else sees, just me." He pulled her close, not caring who might be watching. "And I see you too. I see your strength, your compassion, your extraordinary heart. And I love everything I see." Sierra's tears spilled over as she wrapped her arms around him. "I love you too." 3 months later, William Grayson sat in a wheelchair in the garden of his mansion, watching as Damien and Sierra walked hand in hand among the roses. His recovery had exceeded all expectations. Though his right side remained weakened, he had regained most of his speech and enough mobility to begin using a wheelchair. "They look happy," said Nurse Martinez, who had been hired as William's private nurse. "They are," William replied, his voice stronger now after weeks of therapy. "Never thought I'd see my son like this." "Like what?" "At peace." William smiled. "In love." Across the garden, Damien stopped beside a particularly beautiful white rose bush. He turned to Sierra, taking both her hands in his. "What?" she asked, noticing the sudden seriousness in his expression. "I've been thinking," Damien began. "These past months have shown me what really matters in life, not business deals or power or even success." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "What matters is this, us, family." Sierra's heart began to race as Damien reached into his pocket and dropped to one knee. "I know it hasn't been long," he said, opening a small velvet box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "But when you know, you know. And I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Sierra's hands flew to her mouth. "Sierra James, you were the one person I couldn't turn away from, the one who saw past my walls and found something worth loving. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Sierra's eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." As Damien slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, applause broke out from the direction of the house. William was beaming. Nurse Martinez, beside him with tears in her eyes. Several of the household staff had gathered on the terrace, all smiling. "Did you plan this audience?" Sierra asked, laughing through her tears. "Only your biggest fan," Damien admitted, nodding toward his father. "He insisted on being here." They walked over to William, who reached for Sierra's hand to examine the ring. "Not bad, son," he approved, "though your mother's would have been nice too." "Next time, Dad," Damien said dryly. William's eyes twinkled. "There better not be a next time." He patted Sierra's hand. "Welcome to the family, my dear. Officially." "Thank you," Sierra said softly, "for raising a son who learned how to love again." William's eyes grew misty. "Thank you for showing him how." That evening, after a small impromptu celebration, Damien and Sierra stood on the terrace, looking out at the stars. The future stretched before them, a wedding to plan, a life to build together, challenges still to overcome. Sierra thought about how far they had all come. William, once isolated and forgotten, now surrounded by family and care. Damien, once closed off and cold, now warm and open-hearted. And herself, once merely getting by, now embraced by a love she had never dared to dream of. "What are you thinking about?" Damien asked, his arms around her waist. "How sometimes the most unexpected turns in life lead us exactly where we're supposed to be," she replied. Damien kissed her temple. "I'm exactly where I want to be, with you." From inside the house, they could hear William's jazz records playing, the music that had first formed a bridge between father and son, between past and future. "He's going to be an impossible father-in-law, you know," Damien murmured against her hair. "Stubborn, opinionated, thinks he knows everything." Sierra laughed. "Sounds familiar." "I'm nothing like him," Damien protested, then smiled. "At least, I didn't used to be, now I'm not so sure. You're the best of him," Sierra said, "with a little bit of your mother's heart thrown in." Damien's eyes grew serious. "And a lot of your compassion, I hope." Sierra turned in his arms to face him. "We have a lifetime for me to teach you about compassion." "A lifetime," Damien repeated, as if savoring the words. "It still doesn't seem long enough." As they sealed the promise with a kiss, the first stars appeared in the evening sky. Inside, William watched them through the window, a contented smile on his face. His son had finally found what no amount of money could buy, a love worth everything, and Iki. Sierra, the nurse's aide who had once felt so small in this world of wealth and power, had found that the greatest riches came not from what you possess, but from who you let into your heart. In the end, they had all been healed, not just William's body, but Damien's heart and Sierra's soul. The unlikely family they had formed was stronger than any business empire, more valuable than any fortune. It was, quite simply, a love story, the kind that reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the most unexpected places. And for Sierra and Damien, this was just the beginning. The end